ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mike Larkin, one half of the Steve and Mike Show. www.steveandmikeshow.com is up and running, where you can hear shows like this. This is another edition of On the Mic with Mike, and I am pleased to have on announcer, commentator, you heard him on Ring Warriors, WCWC, and just a whole lot with professional wrestling. I'm on the line with Blake Chadwick. Blake, how you doing?
Doing pretty well, Michael. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Happy to have you on the show. First and foremost, I got to congratulate you guys because WGN America, 8 a.m. on Saturdays, we got Ring Warriors, so congratulations on that TV deal.
Thank you very much. Anytime you have the opportunity to be in front of 80-plus million homes, it's always a win.
It absolutely is, and I'm very happy to see you guys got a great product. I'm going to talk about how you got into that and all, but first and foremost, growing up, as far as wrestling goes, what was either that defining moment or matchup that made you want to get into this crazy business that is professional wrestling?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if it's necessarily a specific matchup or even necessarily one specific performer, but I'm from the Norfolk, Virginia area, coming up in the heart of the Mid-Atlantic region, and I'm growing up in the mid to late 80s. And basically, each and every week almost in my hometown, I have the NWA, which eventually obviously became WCW, Jim Crockett Promotions, and just the ability to watch wrestling each and every week, drawn in by the magazines, the action figures, all of that colorful stuff that we had back then. And ironically, I fell in love with professional wrestling on Saturday mornings. And now here we are with Ring Warriors on Saturday mornings. Things are coming full circle. But, in those formative years, it was the NWA/WCW. It was the WWE or WWF at the time. Little sprinkling of AWA, little sprinkling of World Class amongst some others, such as Global, the outlet there on the ESPN networks. But, just being able to kind of watch wrestling on a weekly basis, specifically there on Saturday mornings, that's kind of what drew me in initially.
I think that's great to mention because, like we mentioned, Ring Warriors is on Saturdays at 8 a.m. And I mean, growing up as a kid, I'm a 90s kid, so, Superstars, the wrestling challenges and all that. And then when they brought when they brought Superstars back on WGN America for a short time that the WWE did, we just had All In 0 Hour was just on WGN America. So WGN America has had its share of professional wrestling, and now at Ring Warriors, it's great to see it on that particular network again.
Certainly, and WGN along with TBS, two of the main network stations that you see coming out, obviously TBS originally out of Atlanta and obviously WGN America originally out of Chicago. You saw that regional channel become a national channel and give you those national products. And I definitely am glad you mentioned Superstars about a decade ago. When WWE brought that back, it kind of had that nostalgic feel. And there is always seemingly room for professional wrestling on a weekend morning, whether it's a Saturday or a Sunday morning. And it seems like Ring Warriors now, once again, trying to fill that niche.
Oh, 100%. I mean, when I saw Superstars come back in 2009 now, I remember the main event of that first show was Undertaker and Matt Hardy. It was around the time when Jeff and Matt Hardy were building towards their match at WrestleMania 25. I even remember, this is not WGM, but, CW. I mean, Saturday Morning Slam was a thing for a short period of time, and that was on at 10 a.m., 11 a.m. This was probably right after you had your Pokemons and your Yu-Gi-Ohs and all that, and boom, here's WWE with Saturday Morning Slam.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you mentioned Saturday Morning Slam, because that was one of those shows that, for me, at that point in my life, with all that I have going on, in addition to all the programming that I have to keep up on, not only just to make sure I'm up on all the products, but, for my own entertainment purposes. Unfortunately, Saturday Morning Slam kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit, but again, it gave the youth, the younger generation, the newer fans, that ability to kind of latch onto something on that Saturday morning and really draw them in.
Oh, yeah, and what was great about that is, later on with that show, Mick Foley was the GM for a short time, but I remember it's like, they would give you like a little info about the Superstars or where they were traveling, and then, oh, here's our match of the week. Here's John Cena versus Heath Slater. Here's Randy Orton versus Damian Sandow. Here's Kofi Kingston versus, as he was known at the time, Michael McGillicuddy. So, it gave you the nice blend of action. It gave you a little info and insight about your certain and favorite superstars.
Which is definitely a cool aspect, and it's a little bit different of a spin that you see on Mondays, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays when it comes to WWE program.
Most definitely, and I think we both have to say this just because. I mean, I got to tell you, I was watching Monday Night Raw last night and watching that opening segment. My heart goes out to Roman Reigns and his family. I mean, dude is battling with leukemia. He fights it before, and I know he will fight it again, knowing the toughness that man is. So, heart thoughts and prayers go out to Roman Reigns. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm watching this. I'm like, okay, Roman's gonna cut the promo. Then he says that. I'm like, oh man, you know what I'm saying? It really threw a lot of people for a loop, and you just hope he gets well and he comes back stronger than ever.
And on the eve of the World Series kicking off, the WWE really threw us a curveball last night.
Oh,
I mean, it was one of those things where we just certainly were not expecting that to come out of the mouth of Roman Reigns. An extremely emotionally charged segment, one of the most real promos we've ever seen out of him, let alone anybody in the WWE. And again, all we can do is sit here and support him and get behind him and hope not only that he's able to make a full recovery, but hopefully one day he's able to get back into the squared circle. And I'd have to imagine when and if that day comes, there will be nobody as popular as Roman Reigns.
Most definitely. Now, I got to ask you, because besides Ring Warriors, I've seen your face a lot of places as well, a lot of great places, in fact. Man, I got to talk about West Coast Wrestling Connection with you. You guys got your, I think it's PDX TV you guys are on for that, right?
Yes, local PDX TV there. It's actually on the Fox 12 Plus channel, which is one of the local affiliates, formerly known as PDX TV. And yeah, it's a great regional program, airs each and every Saturday night at 11 p.m. locally. And then on Mondays, it's released, used to be on YouTube. Unfortunately, it is no longer a free thing if you're not in the Pacific Northwest. You have to subscribe on TitleMatchWrestling.com. But it's certainly a nice little regional product and kind of harkens back to the old territory days where you can kind of see that regional star, that guy kind of break out of a certain area, and you can kind of see how things are presented in the Pacific Northwest.
I think it's great, and I'll be honest with you, I got hooked on it. I'm like, I've seen it, and that's the great thing about social media. You find out things like that, and then I see, I think one of the wrestlers, forgive me, the name escapes me, but I know I saw one of your talents was talking about it, and I'm like, all right, let me check this out, because like I said, I'm a wrestling fan. I enjoy it. I support professional wrestling, local wrestling, so let me check this out. And I'm like, I got to tell you, I was blown away, but I saw you guys got a lot of great guys and gals there.
Absolutely. I mean, the mix of talent is incredible. I mean, you're talking about a lot of the mainstays from the Pacific Northwest, guys like Ethan HD, who's really made a name for himself up there, who's also gone on to train for CWE out in India for the great Khali. You have a lot of the West Coast stars, guys like Alexander Hammerstone and Mike Camden. And you have a nice mix of talent, from the East Coast, guys like Nick Drake coming in there. And then, of course, you have some legendary names, guys like the Vampire Warrior Gangrel. I mean, who doesn't know, Gangrel and his rich history in the professional wrestling business? And you can see a nice mix of young up-and-coming talent, some veteran talents, and guys really ready to break out to the next level each and every week on the WCWC.
I'm not gonna lie, you just threw some nostalgia my way. Every time he would come up through the fire and you hear that, be raw, be raw. Some Gangrel in the Brood, man. That's some good stuff right there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm happy to see him still doing his thing, because I was a big Gangrel fan growing up, man. Watching what he did with the Hardys, Edge and Christian, him on his own, man. And again, he's a veteran that helps out the young talent, so that's a plus and a win-win.
For somebody that's been competing for over 30 years, someone who's about to hit a very monumental birthday, and as a friend of mine, I'm going to go ahead and leave that number out for right now, just so I can make sure that I don't have any heat when we get off of this call. But I'll tell you what, he still brings it just like he did back in the Attitude Era. He hits hard, he's intense, and he's still on top of his game. And anybody out there not utilizing the services of Gangrel is doing their show and their events a disservice, because not only can he teach the young talent, but he can still showcase himself at a high level, and it's pretty much a win for any promotion that decides to utilize him.
And you mentioned actually a talent I want to talk about. Man, that dude's a brute. That dude's a powerhouse. Man, Alexander Hammerstone, I've seen him wrestle with you guys with Ring Warriors and West Coast there. I mean, god dang, that dude has got such potential. He's so athletic for his size. He's a big dude, but he can move like a freight train.
When you want to talk physiques in professional wrestling in 2018, a lot of people start with Brian Cage, but you might want to also throw Alexander Hammerstone into that mix. One of the most physically put-together stars out there today. on Ring Warriors TV. I like to call him the five-tool player. He brings it in just about every aspect of the game. He hits hard. He's got a great look. He can talk. He has speed. He has quickness. He can execute just about any move out there. Hammerstone is the complete package. And I'll tell you what, this is a guy you want to see him now because in a very short amount of time, he might be on a much bigger stage. So if you go to local indie events, whether it's in the Arizona area, Las Vegas, California, or even some other places around the country or even internationally in Japan, Hammerstone is a breakout star and is on my list when it comes to 2019 and talking about guys that are going to get to another level.
I gotta tell you, listening to you and what you talk about with commentary, like I said, I love what you guys do at Ring Warriors as far as what it brings to the commentary team. I mean, you look at ring announcers, you look at like Jim Ross, you look at Jerry the King Lawler as far as commentary goes, you look at Michael Cole, you think of Taz, more of a Nalo even.
Sure.
I gotta say, I'll group you in with that because what you and what you guys do with Ring Warriors, I mean, it's amazing. I think you do great putting over the talent. You yourself, I've seen you. I'm going to say this right now. Barrington Hughes and BJ Murdoch, I've seen you doing your thing, X-Wrestling, and just the way that you talk. You got the gift of gab, man, and it really does. It shows. It shows.
Thank you very much. And you actually just pulled out a hidden gem right there. And I think we're actually, let's see, we are maybe, I want to say we're only like 2 or 3 days away, if not even, it might even be tomorrow, might be the 4-year anniversary of the one time in my 14-plus year career where I stepped outside of the announce booth and I actually managed a team, and that team was the Power, Barrington Hughes and BJ Murdoch, and I managed them in October of 2014 for an event down here in South Florida in Miami for X-Wrestling. Unfortunately, X-Wrestling didn't necessarily, see the value in the Power and decided not to utilize them moving forward, or at least with me in their corner. But for a one-off situation, I'll never forget it, and that promo still does live online along with the rest of the match.
I'm going to tell you what, if you guys have not seen the promo, I'll put that in description. Watch my man, Blake Chadwick here doing his thing. Because I'll be honest with you, dude, I'm watching you. I've seen you do your thing with Ronin Pro Wrestling. VCW is another one. You did a lot with Florida. And I got to say, you do. You got the gift of gab. It reminds me of like an old school Gorilla Monsoon. And I think what you and Larry Brandon do, you're welcome. What you and Larry Brandon do on Ring Warriors is great. You both feed off each other. You call the action. And it just makes what announcing is good because you focus on the match and it makes the match, which adds more prestige with the voices behind it. So I commend you wholeheartedly on that.
Certainly. And, Larry's the guy, doesn't have a tremendous amount of broadcasting experience, but he has a tremendous amount of professional wrestling experience. For those of you who might not be aware, Larry Brandon in another life was known as Vito DiNucci, one half of the New Heavenly Bodies, and a 3-time NWA World Tag Team Champion. So this is a guy who back in the late 90s, early 2000s was running the roads, competing with the best of the best on the independent scene. So he knows what it's like to get it done inside the ring and brings that unique perspective each and every week at the broadcast table.
I got to tell you something else. I've been checking out with your talent. There's a lot of talent. Killer Cross is one. You got at Austin Aries there. There's a lot of talent. Marty the Moth, you see from Impact Wrestling and Lucha Underground. I believe Lance Archer, is doing his thing over there. So you guys, the hits keep on hitting with you guys and the talent pool that y'all are bringing in.
Yeah, the talent pool continues to grow. And, another guy, unfortunately, wasn't able to be part of our first tapings, was actually scheduled but had a little bit of a conflict, was Willie Mack. So, you're seeing a lot of guys that really have made an impact around the world in professional wrestling and are now being able to get it done each and every week on WGN America. A guy you threw out there, Lance Archer, actually making his in-ring debut this coming week on Ring Warriors TV. So certainly keep your eyes peeled for that. And another guy you threw out there, Kevin Cross, Killer Cross, over the last 6 months or so, whether it's been on AAA, Impact Television, Lucha Underground Television, or just around the world, Kevin Cross has really made a huge impact. And this is a guy I was first introduced to about 3 years ago when I began with Paragon Pro Wrestling out there on the West Coast as well. And Killer Cross is a guy who I saw money in him then. For whatever reason, things kind of stagnated a bit for a year or two. But in 2018, you have to say Killer Cross in the conversation for possibly breakout performer of the year.
I wholeheartedly agree with you like that. I'll tell you right now, as someone who's also had conversations with him, the dude is probably, he's got such great ring psychology. He's very smart. He's very driven. He's very determined, very passionate. This is a guy who was also in the original GFW, Global Force Wrestling. So, I mean, he's got the look, and he's just gonna keep going. I mean, he just came off a win over Tommy Dreamer on this past week of Impact. So, again, he's another one that the stock is big on, Killer Cross.
Absolutely.
Dude, you talk about Paragon Pro Wrestling. We talk about Ronin Pro Wrestling. I gotta say, is there anywhere as far as company go? Because as I said, I'm doing research on it. And I know we were gonna talk some Ring Wars, but I'm looking at you and I'm like, dang, this dude's like everywhere with his announcing and stuff. And it's a test to show. Like you mentioned, 14 years of experience. Like I mean, you're just gonna keep going. You're everywhere, man, and I love it.
Well, I appreciate that, and my goal is to be out there as the voice of the next generation of professional wrestling. I mean, you've seen, guys, obviously we had the JR era, we've had the Soli era, we basically are living the Michael Cole era. The next era I would like to help usher in, and that is, what I'm trying to do right now and being able to branch out around. There are not a tremendous amount of announcers that work nationwide without being under contract. That is something that I pride myself in. And, there's a lot of big companies out there. There's a lot of great events that I'm trying to, put my stamp on. And as an announcer in 2018, it's not the
Mm-hmm. Hello? Blake? Hello? Hello? Blake? Yeah, hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Right.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, go ahead. Repeat it. Yeah, that's all right. You came back. Go ahead.
Yeah, basically, just saying it's one of those things where, in 2018, it's not the easy to get from signed announcer, but I'm doing my best to put it all together, and I've been lucky enough to land some high-profile opportunities, and I'm going to continue to try to grow with those each and every week I can.
And personally, I can't wait to see it, dude. And I'll say this right now to you. Ring Warriors, Austin Aries. I mean, he's been the topic of conversation at this latest, what happened at Bound for Glory. And I got to say, I did see his match. Chris Bay is another talented guy there. He got a shot at the Impact World Championship. And I got to ask you, Austin Aries being on that roster, that's another one. A lot of people may say a very polarizing, controversial figure, but the dude can work.
A big feather in the cap for Ring Warriors being able to acquire the services of Austin Aries. Obviously, at the time, unbeknownst to me and the rest of everybody else, that he ended up buying a little bit of a stock in the company. But I'll tell you what, Austin Aries, when you talk about talents out there right now, he ranks up there with the best of them. And, you mentioned that match with Chris Bay. Bay gave him a run for his money, but Aries was able to maintain his championship hold there at the time, obviously no longer the Impact World Champion. But Austin Aries is he's an all-star. He's an A-plus player. And I'm curious to see what else he brings to Ring Warriors over the next few weeks. Some certainly interesting developments will take place. But obviously now, with his seemingly free agent status, from what I understand, he is still a part of the Ring Warriors roster, still has his minority stake in the company. But with Austin Aries, you never know what could happen next. And that's something I'm very interested to see.
Me too. And I mean, Eli Drake is another one I think y'all got on your radar. There's Jeff Cobb. There's a lot that are coming in there. And if you want to look at the women's side of things, man, you got Desi Dorada, Heather Monroe. I mean, it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger. And I mean, I got to say this to you. The women's revolution, evolution, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of great talented women out there. And you guys got some great women in Ring Warriors as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you take a look at some of these women, like Santana Garrett. I mean, you want to talk about one of the top unsigned stars in the country today. Santana's right up there. You want to talk about Nicole Savoy. I mean, not many hit as hard as Nicole Savoy. Desi Dorada, I mean, with that size and the look, a lot of potential there. Still a little rough around the edges, still has a lot of room to grow, but that's someone in the next year or two to see what she can bring to the table. And, of course, Allison Danger. You throw her in the mix there on the outside, Danger Inc. I mean, that's the kind of veteran that never really know what she can bring. So, again, Melissa Anderson, another veteran. Heather Monroe, a top up-and-comer. I mean, there's a lot of women on this roster right now that we're very curious to see what they're able to do and give a little bit of a different take than you're seeing on the WWE or some of the other programs.
I gotta say to this to you, man. And what's great about the women thing too is because the way, like we mentioned, evolution of women, the girls that we have now who have learned from such greats is like Jazz, who just competed at NWA 70th anniversary. Girls like Jacqueline, Trish Stratus, Lita. I mean, and look at the girls that are now: Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, all of them, Becky Lynch. And then you look at the Impact roster, the Knocker roster, Japan. I mean, my God, there's so many great women talent out there. And look at the MMA wrestling tie-in. I mean, people talk about guys like Ken Shamrock and Dan Severn and Tank Abbott. I mean, Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, the Four Horsewomen. I mean, that MMA thing helps as well too, just because I love seeing the as a fan of both, and I respect both. It's great to see the MMA wrestling tie-in as well.
Oh, absolutely, and it brings that sense of realism, that real sense of sport. And you've seen things kind of shift over the last couple of years, kind of back the other way. I mean, pro wrestling, throughout the '80s, especially that NWA presentation, that style, it's more hard hitting, it's more realistic, it's more of that sports feel. And you've seen things kind of go the other way, where it's a little more cartoony, and you don't have that same presentation. But I will say, over the last couple of years, with a lot of the rise in popularity of mixed martial arts and the UFC in general, you're seeing a lot of those crossover stars. I mean, WWE right now talking to Daniel Cormier about possibly being a color commentator on SmackDown moves to Fox. Obviously, the success of Ronda Rousey, certainly the crossover talents in a guy like Brock Lesnar. It's very difficult right now to ignore the impact that mixed martial arts is having on pro wrestling.
Most definitely. And as far as women, I mean, I'm going to tell you right now, I watch NXT UK, look at the talents like Nina Samuels and Toni Storm. Look at UK company ICW is a big one. Mexico, Japan. I mean, I know that's places where you guys, obviously later on, as far as Ring Warriors go, you guys want to get to travel in Japan. I mean, that's like the hotbeds right now. Japan, Mexico, UK. I mean, so many great talents all over the world, and it's just the hits are going to keep coming. And I love to see you guys. I love what you're doing in Las Vegas. But I'm sure in the future, y'all are going to expand and go into different markets and different places as well.
There's a lot of discussion right now about where we are going to be taping moving forward. I mean, from what I understand, the next taping most likely will be in Las Vegas, but there's a lot of rumblings right now. We could be moving to possibly the central part of the country for a taping or two, possibly the East Coast, maybe the Northeast. There's a lot of opportunity right now when it comes to Ring Warriors and what we're going to be able to do, which is a very exciting thing. And just, again, just looking at the landscape right now, it's, you're talking about Japan and Mexico and all these other places. Right now in Japan, it's so hot. There's never been a time where more foreigners have been competing at a high level in the Far East. And that's a great thing for all professional wrestlers over here, and especially for companies looking to maybe do some tours or possibly branch out there. I don't think the time has ever been better for wrestling right now to expand throughout the world.
Most definitely. And here's the thing. People say what they will, because, there's some people out there like, oh, we won't transition to the U.S. I mean, look at these people that we got coming out. I mean, look at Io Shirai, one of the Japanese finest, in Stardom. And you see what New Japan Pro Wrestling's doing. New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor are going to do Madison Square Garden. And personally, as a wrestling fan, I know you as well, I cannot wait for that to happen. I think that's amazing that for the first time we're going to see those two, companies go do their thing at MSG.
A tremendous amount of professional jealousy for all of the roster of New Japan Pro Wrestling and Ring of Honor for their ability to compete in MSG, because as little as 6 months ago, anybody in this industry, unless you're signed with the WWE, would think it's next to impossible to be able to work a wrestling event or in general in Madison Square Garden. And now that's going to happen come next spring, and it's a big-time movement. And we talk about how All In has changed the game. We talked about how that kind of revitalized the independent scene. Ring of Honor, a company right now that some could say is number 2, some could even say is number 3 in terms of its status in the United States. They're going to be running Madison Square Garden to a sold-out show with New Japan Pro Wrestling. That just shows you now in 2018, 2019, this modern day of pro wrestling, literally anything could happen.
Really, anything can happen, and it's great to see. And I think pro wrestling and what we have right now, just all in all, it's a plus and it's a win-win for all parties involved. And speaking of all parties, man, I got to talk more about this roster with you. I got to ask you about these Slambinos. Now, the Slambinos, I got to tell you, I crack up every time I see these promos. You got that entertainment vibe. You got Luke Hawx, who's another veteran. You got Alex Chamberlain, Wes Briscoe, son of Gerald Briscoe. I mean, he's also Impact Wrestling. He's part of the Aces and Eights. I mean, Whew, there's a blend here, man. There's a great talent. There's a little entertainment aspect and the great women. I mean, my God, I had to mention Slambinos because I did write them down. And I'm watching these guys, and I'm Italian, so I get it. So I mean, I got to say, I was highly entertained.
So I'm sure you were celebrating Slambino Sunday with the Slambinos this past week.
Oh, of course I would. Come on, Slambinos. I would totally Slambino Sunday. Hell yeah.
Exactly, and you take a look at those two guys, and they're no strangers to the squared circle. You look at Frankie the Thumb, Francisco Chiazzo. He's been in professional wrestling for over 20 years. He used to compete in Ohio Valley Wrestling. Yeah, he's been in Deep South Wrestling. I mean, he's been around pretty much everywhere. He's wrestled the likes of Kofi Kingston when he was in developmental. Zack Ryder. I mean, this is a guy who's really been there and done it all. And he's the definition of a journeyman. He's been around all over. He competes all over the Southeast. I mean, he's the kind of guy that has his nose to the grindstone, is out there each and every weekend making towns, and he's the true veteran of this group. And then you look at his tag team partner, AJ Genazzo, Bootsy Genazzo, as he's called sometimes. He's the more laid back, I guess, the little more goofy of the two. But he possesses athleticism, and this is a guy who's been a staple on the Florida independent scene for the last 15 years or so. He's since branched out west. He's living out in California now. But I'll tell you what, the Slambinos together as a unit, they work with each other very well. And then you add in Glenn Gilberti, the former Disco Inferno, as their manager, kind of their advisor. The Slambinos look to be as strong as ever.
I was going to bring up Disco Inferno. Now, I got to say, another one who people will say what they will, but I got to say, Disco Inferno, former member of the NWO, WCW Cruiserweight Champ, TV Champ, Tag Champ. Dude is another one, a very veteran. NYC, him and Johnny Swinger in the early stages of TNA.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's another one. And Future Stars of Wrestling, I believe he's a trainer there. So, I mean, he's another one giving back to the business.
Right, Future Stars of Wrestling partnering with Ring Warriors to put on these events. Of course, the local promotion there in Las Vegas. And Disco Inferno does have his hands on a lot of the training for some of those young talents. And he's the kind of guy where, he hasn't gotten in an in-ring competition yet for Ring Warriors on WGN, but he's in great shape. He still has the ability to go inside that ring. And if someone gets under the Slambino's skin, whether it's in a tag team situation, a handicap, maybe a six-man, whatever it might be, would not be surprised to see Glenn Gilberti roll up those sleeves and throw down a little bit, as he looks to become more involved with the Slambinos, I'd say, probably in the next few weeks here on Ring Warriors.
What's also very interesting, you got a great tag scene. You got the 1%, you got Darkchild and the Demigod of Death. I mean, there's a lot of blends with the tag teams, and I mean, Jay Spade is another great talent there. I mean, Alex Chamberlain, I mentioned, Wes Briscoe. I mean, the list could go on. Matt Lancic is another one. I mean, god dang, man. I mean, the talent pool is just amazing. I just had to throw those names because, again, I'm very, taken aback with this talent. I'm really, truly wish you and Ring Warriors nothing but the best, because it's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger from here, man.
Well, I truly appreciate that, and I think each and every week the episodes have gotten stronger. I mean, we've had hiccups here and there, but which company doesn't? And it's something where I think, each week we're seeing better in-ring talent, we're seeing better stories being told, and I think you'll continue to see that increase as time goes by. And just looking at the landscape, you talked about some of those guys there, Matt Lancey, Jay Spade coming to us from the Bayou there with Luke Hawks and Wildcat Wrestling. Ring Warriors is doing a really good job of going out there, finding talent from different pockets of the country, cycling them in and out, always keeping talent fresh. You're going to obviously see certain guys, like your Austin Aries and your Luke Hawks and some of these other big talents that are going to be there each and every week. But you never know. Some guy could come in, he could come out, a new guy could come in. It has that very territory feel to it. And I think it's very exciting as a fan to be able to know each and every week you could see someone debuting, you could see someone leaving. Just that constant unknown of mix of talent to me is pretty exciting.
Okay, I'm going to mention this because as a veteran that Luke Hawks is, and I love what he's doing with Wildcat, I think I remember the first time I saw him, I obviously knew of Altar Boy Luke, and I've seen his work as Altar Boy Luke. I know he did some WWE extra work, and I know his acting work, but I got to tell you, the first time I ever saw him, you remember Wrestling Society X on MTV?
Of course.
Oh, man. All right. It was very short lived on MTV, but I gotta say the overall presentation, I thought that was very entertaining. That was like 2006, 2007. But yes, that was the first time I remember seeing Luke Hawx's Wrestling Society X every Friday night on MTV. And I mean, MTV is another network that has had Sunday Night Heat on it, so wrestling was very privy to wrestling, and obviously in the '80s with the whole rock and wrestling thing and the war to settle the score. So I mean, damn.
Absolutely. I mean, Luke Hawk's the kind of guy. I mean, you started back then. You look at him now, he's put on probably 100 pounds of muscle. But, I mean, Hawk's the guy who's really transformed himself. And, you talked about his stunt work, his acting stuff. I mean, he's a multifaceted talent. And he's certainly someone that Ring Warriors is very happy to have as a cornerstone of the roster.
Oh, man. And you know what it is, too? I see all you guys doing your thing. And the 8 a.m. thing, I'm very happy to see you guys get your TV deal. But I got to ask you, is there anywhere, like we talked about, like moving to markets and going to Central America and just doing like tapings there as well? Is there, I got to ask you, are we going to get that Ring Warriors pay-per-view in the future? Is that something I'm sure that's in the cards for you guys?
It's definitely something that is in the, I guess I could say it's in the bank. But it's not finalized yet, obviously. We still have a lot left to go. We've only had 6 weeks of TV thus far. Everything's, continuing to develop at a pretty rapid rate. But definitely something we're going to be exploring. A lot of people have inquired about how to watch Ring Warriors if you don't have WGN. Of course, it's in 80 million homes, 80 million plus homes. But, again, that still counts for a lot of the country that's either cut the cord or does not have WGN in general. And what we tell those people is that right now we're in the process of getting something together so we can work that out for everyone that does not have WGN. From what I understand, there's probably going to be something Roku related. I don't know a whole lot of other issues or rather other options right now. That's kind of what I've been told. I've not been in the forefront of these conversations, but from what I understand, it's going to be announced very soon, and it should give the ability for pretty much anyone that doesn't currently have the channel to be able to watch it.
And I just want to say, as far as yourself with the announcing, I got to mention Ken Resnick does a very good job as well. I do enjoy Mr. Resnick.
Gotta love Killer Ken Resnick, former AWA and WWF announcer. The guy stood next to the likes of Hulk Hogan, and now he's standing next to the likes of the next generation. And it's a pleasure for me to be able to toss it backstage to Ken Resnick, to be able to take it back from Ken Resnick. These are things that, sometimes you have to sit back and say, that's pretty cool.
It is, and I think what's great about you is, because talking to you even outside of before we did this show, I can tell you're very passionate about what you do. I know you love what you do, you respect what you do, and you're just a very humble individual. In 14 years, that's saying something right there, because it just means you're doing something right.
Listen, I'm 32 years old. My entire existence, I've pretty much known professional wrestling. There's not really a time in my life that I cannot recall professional wrestling being at the forefront. I'm literally living the dream for everybody that watched in the mornings, playing with action figures, playing video games, reading the magazines, following online. I'm basically the voice of you, and I'm the one that has had the privilege and opportunity to be able to go on and do it. Still not anywhere close to where I want to be yet, but we're slowly getting there, and it's exciting to be able to hit some of these markers and to be able to work with some of these people that, were huge influences on me growing up. And it's exciting. And it's something that, again, sometimes I have to sit back and say, you know what, this is pretty cool.
And I gotta say, it is really cool. And I gotta say this: you talk about video games. Now, I'm a kid growing up. You shut your mouse. Here comes the pains. I even had the TNA Impact game that they had in 2008 for that year, and I think
which was pretty fun, despite the lack of depth of talent.
Okay. We're like on the same wavelength with that, because I was about to say almost exactly like that. Not spot on, but you're very correct on that. Because I enjoyed playing.
In a way. Okay. They kind of remind me a little bit of, I don't know if you're familiar with the Nintendo 64 game, but I think it was World Tour, WCW versus NWO World Tour.
I remember.
Very fun game, but there's only about maybe 15 roster members.
That's true, man. And okay, you know what's so funny? I look at like video games, and everybody puts on like the worst one. Number one will always go down as WCW Backstage Assault, for those that remember WCW. And I'm just like, it is. I see that. I see the ECW games up there. I didn't play it, but I remember when the Insane Clown Posse had that backyard wrestling. I think Sanjay Dutt was a playable character in those. Remember those?
I vaguely remember that. Sanjay being a playable character somewhat rings a bell.
Okay, but yeah, he was in one of those. I mean, the WWE games, I gotta say, 2K19, I've seen. You know what's great about, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love video games, but with the association with YouTube, there's every, like, gamer out there, like, playing My Career and putting up the video of them playing My Career on the YouTube. So I just follow that because of the social media thing surrounding it in YouTube, but I'm just like, man, that looks like a fun-ass game.
Right, absolutely.
And I mean, I think AJ Kirsch, who was in Tough Enough and is the voice of the main guy in that, I think he did a great job with it, all in all. And I think just video games in general, I mean, personally, as someone who is an Impact Wrestling fan for 14 years, I'd like to see them come out and do some more stuff and have a video game. I definitely would love to see that. And personally, I think the world of video games for pro wrestling has been great. I mean, I had the Legends of WrestleMania, where Andy Kaufman was a downloadable character, for those who remember that, and I'm sure you remember that as well, Blake.
Certainly.
But yeah, man, I mean, just the video game element, just all in all with professional wrestling and how it's evolved over the years has just been great, and it's just going to continue to get better and better. And sir, before we close out, I'm going to say this to you right now. Anytime you want to come on this show and just talk wrestling like we did today, Ring Warriors, and just, just promote, man, I'm happy to have you.
And that sounds great. And I'll tell you what, Mike, along with everyone out there listening, as much as I'm involved in the business, as much as I've been entrenched for a decade plus, I still love wrestling. And still on a daily basis, I still want to watch wrestling. I still want to digest wrestling. My perspective has changed a little bit naturally being in the business, but I still love it, and I still want to talk about it, whether it's from the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, whatever it is, whatever company it is. I'd love to talk about it, and I appreciate that, and I'm going to hold you to that because I would love to come back, and I would love to talk wrestling because sometimes it is a great thing to just kind of take a step back as a fan and just kind of survey the scene from that perspective.
Absolutely, and I mean, you're a guy here that, the Attitude Era, WCW, the Monday Night Wars, watching old NWA tapes and just appreciate what they do in Japan, Mexico, and all around. I'm a fellow guy who loves talking about pro wrestling. We both love pro wrestling, so I think it was great that we got to talk about the business and Ring Warriors because, again, I'm very happy to see you guys get your TV deal, and you're more than welcome to come back on, and we'll definitely have a more in-depth about this next time. But I got to say, as someone who's been in the business 14 years, announcing, commentating, West Coast Wrestling Connection, WGN America, Ring Warriors, Paragon Pro Wrestling, Ronin Pro Wrestling. You've been a lot of places. Do you have any advice for any guy or gal that wants to pursue a career in ring announcing, broadcasting, or just who wants to get into professional wrestling?
I will definitely throw that out there in a second, but another company, and certainly no fault here for letting it slip through the cracks, but another big venture that I'm a part of is WrestleCade. I'm not exactly sure if you've ever heard of it, but WrestleCade is the largest independent professional wrestling event and convention on the East Coast that's not WWE related. You get some huge, huge matches on there. I've called WrestleCade the last 3 years. Thankfully, last year I was fortunate enough to work with Kevin Kelly as my color guy, which was an incredible experience. And I'm slated to be there again for year number 4 this year and announced yesterday, brand new for the second time, NWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis slated to defend that championship. There's some great matches already signed, some big-time talent already there. You're going to see close to 6,000 in attendance at the Super Show, close to 10,000 in attendance all weekend long. There's a big event on Friday, which is a showcase of champions featuring different championship matches from around the country representing different companies. In fact, the West Coast Wrestling Connection will have a Pacific Northwest Championship match on that card. So it's an incredible weekend, and me personally, probably the most fun venture, with no disrespect to any other company I work for, but probably the most fun I have just based on the fact that it's a big convention in only a couple of days.
I was actually good to say, it says, as soon as you mention WrestleCade, and I've seen it for years, it's Winston-Salem, North Carolina, right?
Yes, Winston-Salem, North Carolina at the Benton Convention Center, and it's growing each and every year. And the thing that I love about it, growing up in the Mid-Atlantic region, it continues that Mid-Atlantic tradition of wrestling on Thanksgiving weekend.
And you know what it is, too, the history with the Mid-Atlantic and all that, and you talk about that weekend. I think that's great because I loved how, I remember the one experience I had where it was like there was a meet and greet and then the actual show, because you guys have a big weekend of, the autograph signings, the matchups.
Right.
I remember SummerSlam 2007. That was they actually had, I think, a couple of New York Giants there because they were in New Jersey, and you could like play games and stuff, and then you got right into the show that Sunday. I just remember that whole experience was great. I got to meet them out, saw Jimmy Hart, so I as a fan appreciate that because it's the wrestlers. You get to meet your favorite wrestlers and not only talk with them and engage in conversation, but then you got the whole night of action right ahead of you. So I think that's just a great mix and a great blend for all wrestling fans.
Absolutely, and it's a great way for fans to really, meet talent and kind of see what they're like, behind the curtain. And that's certainly an incredible experience. But to go back to your question, any advice, I would certainly recommend to anyone, find a credible school. Find a school with somebody that has done something, someone that has made a living in pro wrestling, someone that has signed a contract, someone that has gone on to a level that you're aspiring to be. With no disrespect to anybody that's always been a local one-town talent, you can't really give them the experience that is going to help them grow as a performer and help get them to the next level. So my first bit of advice is to go out, find a credible teacher, find a credible school. Right down here in South Florida, we have Gangrel's Wrestling Asylum. Doesn't get much more credible than that. So that's just an example right there. Lance Storm, Team 3D, different schools like that, people that have been there and done that. And my second bit of advice would be to find mentors. Find people that, again, have been places you want to go. Find people that are better than you, with more experience than you, and learn from them. Because in this day and age, where you're not going from territory to territory, you have to find ways to draw on experience otherwise. It's getting in a car with veterans and just listening. It's going to shows. It's doing all the things needed to do that you have to do when the bell's not ringing. When the match is not occurring, it's building all of that up around you, learning the business, just soaking in information, and just trying to be the best you can be. And listen, it's something that, it's probably not going to happen overnight, but in 2018 here, we're going into 2019, you never say never. And there's plenty of people in this day and age. There's more people today that are at a higher level and have success in the business without running around for 20 years for $20, driving 500 miles. You don't necessarily have to do it that way to have success. It's finding success while still respecting the business, but doing whatever you can to get to the next level, because the person that works the hardest will get there before the person that's the most talented.
Beautifully said. And I was also going to say, I had to touch upon, because you mentioned Florida, and I mean, Florida Championship Wrestling, Kevin Sullivan. I mean, people talk about Texas, but and a lot, obviously the PC and Team 3D Academy and a lot of the Gangrel School, but Florida is probably one of the best with prestige as far as wrestling goes. So again, you got a lot of places to go if you want to become a professional wrestling in Florida.
Yeah, and you mentioned, the Flambinos, Francisco Chiazzo, the head trainer of the WWN training school, of course, the Worldwide Wrestling Network. That's Evolve, FIP, all of those different companies under that banner. Francisco Chiazzo is the head trainer there. So there's a lot of great places to learn and get opportunity. And it's, it's just a matter of finding the right one. And, never be afraid to ask questions. Always seek advice. And one of the things that I like to do, whether it's not necessarily a fixed number of people or a certain group of people, but I always try to just network and then stay in touch with people. Because the more your name is in someone's mind, the more relevant you are to someone, the more opportunity that you'll probably get, or your name's going to come up for something down the line. So it's just keeping yourself out there, being respectful, and doing whatever you have to do to get to that next level. Because I can promise you there is someone out there right now working a little bit harder.
I'm just also going to say, to reiterate what you said, guys got to be humble. Humbleness is very key.
It is very key, and I'm glad you brought up humbleness because, there's people that have done a lot less than me. There's people that have done a lot more than me. But it's one of those things where you always just have to stay grounded. And listen, I have to remember, I'm an auxiliary talent. I'm an announcer. I'm in a position where, yes, I've earned the respect from the wrestlers. I'm treated as an equal in the locker room. But a lot of promoters, a lot of people look at me as disposable. They look at me as someone they can replace with their buddy down the street for no pay. And my job is to show them, not convince them, but to show them that I add value to a show, that I take things to another level. And those are the kind of things where you have to be humble, because if you try to come off a certain way, that's going to turn a lot of people off.
Agreed. And I think, and I'll say this as far as myself goes, because I said to you, I said, well, the reason why I love doing this, I give people like yourself a chance and a place to showcase and, you know, promote themselves, give them a place to tell their story. And I think as far as from an interviewer perspective is, you know, respect is key with everything. You guys could tell that I love and respect professional wrestling, and I appreciate what you guys do. So I've done this for like 3-4 years now, but I just got to say, every interview that I do is an absolute pleasure and a privilege. Why? Because you get to meet great people like yourself, and we also get to have fun and just tell stories and just talk what you love and just, yeah, again, be very appreciative and humble.
Absolutely, and I wish everyone had that same outlook as you, because you seem to understand that your role. You seemingly understand how it works, and that's going to help you succeed, and that's going to help you get to another level. And it's just very important to know that it could all end tomorrow. And if you're an active in-ring competitor, whether it's an injury, I mean, you saw Roman Reigns last night. It could be an illness. It could be anything. And it could all be over tomorrow, and you have to remember, cherish every moment, stay humble, and just continue to work hard, because that's going to – the longer you work hard, the more it's going to pay off, because if you keep working hard, you're going to end up passing all those that end up, you know, not putting 100% effort in.
Most certainly. And Blake, before we do go, man, we got to talk about Ring Warriors. Promote Ring Warriors. Promote your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and just promote and just tell everybody where we can follow Ring Warriors. Check it out. WGN America, 8 a.m. on Saturday. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And, you know, just keep tuning in. WGN America, that's 8 a.m. on the East Coast, 8 a.m. on the West Coast, 7 p.m. Central, or excuse me, 7 a.m. Central Time. And then, you know, check out the Blake Chadwick professional page on Facebook if you'd like to follow me and what I'm doing there. I also have a personal page on there, the Blake Chadwick page, but professional page is where I do some live videos and get some content from different events. You can follow me, StatGuyBAC, on Instagram. I'm not a huge Twitter user. You can find me on there as well, but I don't tweet a tremendous amount. I'm still trying to get into the Twitterverse. But yeah, just continue to support independent professional wrestling, continue to support this podcast, and just be a good fan, because we don't have enough of those, and good fans are what keeps this business thriving. So from myself and all the wrestlers around there, we appreciate you.
I also would just like to add, I love that name for social media, the Stat Guy. I just got to tell you, I do appreciate that. I did really enjoy that. As soon as I saw Stat Guy, I'm like, I dig that. Because, I mean, you know a lot. Good.
I was branded Stat Guy back in 2004 when I first came to college, because in addition to professional wrestling, I'm a sports announcer. I'm a huge sports fan. Sports has always been my thing, and I happen to be pretty knowledgeable about sports without giving myself the old Barry Horowitz over here. You know, I'd like to think I know a pretty good amount. So my friends in college, they branded me Stat Guy. I've kept it with me ever since, and going to try to continue on with it in the future and see where it might lead.
Well, I really, truly wish you nothing but the best. And I dig that, man. I really do. And I mean that with the utmost sincerity and respect. And again, I look forward to having you back on in the future. This has been a lot of fun, just shooting the breeze, talking wrestling and Ring Warriors. And people, check it out, WGN America, 8 a.m. Saturdays. And Blake, again, I look forward to having you on next time. And I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you. You've been great. It's been an absolute pleasure being on the podcast. And like you said, let's definitely reconnect, because I would love to come back. We can talk some Ring Warriors. We can get into some old storylines. I mean, we could talk some really good stuff on here.
Oh, we will. And I can't wait to do that again. But, man, we covered a lot of elements today, and we really did go well. And I just want to leave it at that. And I just want to say again, for Blake Chadwick, my name is Mike Larkin. We're going to do this again. And people, check out Ring Warriors. If you're not, you should be. All right, everyone, have a great day.